Okay, so I just heard the worst news I've heard in a long time, and just made me burst into tears. I just read on RT.com that Julian Assange has been arrested after Ecuador tears up asylum deal. And there's a photo of him here. I want to show you what that photo looks like. They're dragging him out of the embassy, and he looks like an old man, and he's yellow looking, and it's the most disgraceful thing I've ever seen. One of the most disgraceful things I've ever seen. Look at him there. Look at them dragging him. I'm not going to be polite when I say this. Yes. So he went into the asylum. I went into Ecuador embassy in 2011, and Julia Gillard was Prime Minister at the time, I believe, and then Kevin Rudd took over from her, and ever since, the Australian government, right from the beginning, when he took asylum there, he's a publisher, Julian Assange. He is an Australian citizen, and ever since that time, the Australian government has abandoned him pretty much well and truly, because they are US lackeys. And now, it's likely that he will have a kangaroo court in the United States. He'll be tortured, and they could even execute him, because Trump is in office right now, and there are really, really warmongering, neoconservative psychopaths like John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, and they are likely to influence Trump, if he needs any influencing at all, to even execute him on some sort of espionage. Julian Assange is a publisher who released leaked information from whistleblowers, and Wikileaks, that's what they do. And this is an assault on the freedoms of the press. Not to mention that the Australian government has completely abandoned an Australian citizen and left him to rot in that embassy these last 7 years. I might have the dates wrong. I'm a little bit upset, as you can see. But as far as I understand, it's been 7 years. I've done a few videos on this. I rang Penny Wong's office, Senator Penny Wong, who is the Foreign Affairs Minister, and her flak catcher's reply at the reception was, Ms. Wong has the right to mention whomever she wishes. In other words, she is not going to show any interest in Julian Assange and his plight whatsoever. This is a disgrace, and I blame every single member of government since he sought asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy, personally responsible for anything that happens to Julian Assange from this point onwards, and everything that he has experienced, the solitary, awful existence that he has had to go through in that Ecuadorian embassy, because he knew that this was going to happen one day, and he was receiving no support whatsoever from my pathetic federal government. Either side of the aisle, the Liberal government the coalition, sorry, and the Labour government. You have done nothing at all. And if you think that this isn't going to come back to haunt you one day, then you are sadly mistaken. And all the press, all the mainstream media, the corporate-owned mainstream media, the Murdoch press, if you think this isn't going to smack you in the ass one day, because this is an assault on freedom of the press, and you have the freedom to spread your bigotry and hate, and to protect governments, and to protect US empire, and one day this is going to come back to hit you in the ass. This is how fascism spreads. This is how fascism spreads. And my government, the Australian government, both major parties, and I can't say the Greens have been any better, the Green Party. I don't recall anybody really from the Green Party. Please feel free to leave in the comments section if you know of anybody who's been regularly talking about Julian Assange, but I don't know of anybody in the Federal Green Party or anywhere else, really. I know that Julian Burnside, I think at one point, isn't in the Green Party yet, but he's running for the Green Party. I think he might have mentioned Julian Assange or was even representing him at some point. I don't know. But anyway, it is an abomination what has happened. An absolute abomination. And I am so... This has been haunting me, his pretty much solitary incarceration in that embassy in a tiny little room for all these years has sort of haunted me fairly regularly, just thinking that this man has been he's been stuck there, and my government has abandoned him, and then they have had no intentions of doing anything. It's been pointless trying to get any politicians to do anything. I've had numerous arguments with the receptionists because, of course, you can never speak to politicians, these federal politicians. They're cowards. They're just doing the bidding of the US. And the US is upset with Julian Assange because Julian Assange is a publisher and dared to leak whistleblowers like Chelsea Manning, whom, by the way, we wouldn't allow into Australia. This is the sort of disgusting governments we have. The coalition government, the Scott Morrison government, the Malcolm Turnbull government. They keep changing their leaders. They're all pathetic. And I honestly don't think if Bill Shorten got into office, there's a federal election in May this year, 2019, I do not believe that Bill Shorten would do anything either. If Julian Assange was still in that embassy, I do not believe Bill Shorten would have done anything either if he had become Prime Minister. They've shown no interest whatsoever. They have been completely silent. And the mainstream media has just vilified him. He's been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. He actually is a hero. And if we weren't about to go extinct from stupidity as a species, he would be looked back upon as a hero, as he is. And you don't have to like him. You don't have to like him. It's not about liking him or disliking him. This is irrelevant to this issue. The issue is, he is a publisher. He is an Australian citizen. He published leaks by a whistleblower, by whistleblowers. It is a valuable, valuable, valuable contribution to democracy, to hold politicians' feet to the fire, to hold governments' feet to the fire, to expose war crimes. That's what Chelsea Manning did. And apparently that is a sort of espionage and treason, and it's an executable offense and Chelsea Manning, by the way, is in prison again. She voluntarily went to prison again to protect Julian Assange because they tried to question her under a grand jury, and she said that went against the First, Fourth and Sixth Amendments, what they were trying to do to her, to basically snitch on Julian Assange. You don't have to like him to agree that whistleblowers have a right to whistleblow, basically. They have a right to do so. And what Wikileaks does, it actually helps facilitate the information to get out to the public from whistleblowers, like Chelsea Manning. So if you have a problem with that, you don't really believe in freedom of the press. You don't believe in democracy. You are assisting fascists. That's what you're doing. And I am disgusted at any federal government, no matter who was in office, whether it was Julia Gillard in the Labour Party, or Kevin Rudd in the Labour Party, or Tony Abbott and the Coalition, or Scott Morrison and the Coalition, or Malcolm Turnbull and the Coalition, all these pathetic, spineless, no offence to invertebrates, spineless leaders who did nothing. I hold you and all your parties, anybody that was in government, that was a member of parliament at that time, who wasn't speaking out about this, and that's a lot of you, I hold you all personally responsible for what happens to that man, Julian Assange, from now on. And all the suffering that he has had to endure, trying to avoid being extradited to this appalling rogue state, the US empire, that we still are a colony of. Australia is a colony of. And we do whatever their bidding is. He's been trying to avoid being extradited to the US because they'll have a kangaroo court. They will throw him in prison for the rest of his life. They'll throw away the key, or worse, they will execute him. And you, all of you members of parliament, since he went in there to that embassy, and you said nothing, I hold you all personally responsible for every sort of suffering psychologically and physically he's had since being in there, every stress, his separation from his children, Chelsea Manning, the whole bit. I hold you responsible. I hold you responsible for what happens from now on. If he's extradited to the US, if he's tortured, which he will be, and if he's executed, which is very likely, I hold you all personally responsible. And I hold you accountable for the destruction of freedom of the press. And one day that will bite you all. It will bite you all. If you think fascism just stops at some point, no, it doesn't. This is what is happening, and you are assisting it. You disgust me. And by the way, another disgusting thing about the Federal Labour Party is endorsing Juan Guaido, a self-appointed stooge of the United States in Venezuela. They're trying to overthrow that democratically elected government, and you are assisting them. This is the idiocy and the patheticness of the leaders, so-called leaders, and so-called public servants, representatives of us. You do not represent me. You do not represent a lot of people. I hope those images of him being dragged down the steps. Can you imagine, after 7 years of never being out in the sunlight or out of that room, the psychological torture of being dragged down the steps of the embassy by a whole bunch of people and then being shoved in a car? Can you imagine the psychological trauma of that? The stress? It is absolutely, I am appalled. I am appalled. And I blame the Australian pathetic government, the federal government, whoever was in office since this has all started. I blame you all. And I hope those images, and I hope everything that happens to him haunts you. If you haven't done anything yet, you better do something now. before they extradite him. If you have 1 ounce of ethics in you, Australian government and anybody else who has not said anything, you must say something now.